Rev up your engine. All right, here we have an $800 Kia, but not just any $800 Kia. He paid $800 for it 3.5 years ago and about 45,000 miles ago, and it's still running down the road. As we open the door, we can see this is an '04 Kia, and it was made in Korea, the better ones. Got 135,000 miles, and the heater still works. Check it out. Starts right up. Now, it is a 5-speed standard transmission, which, if anything, is the best of all possible worlds. Their automatic transmissions, bleh, they're not the greatest, but these standards are pretty good transmissions. Look, dinosaur technology. For you youngins out there, these are called hand crank windows because you crank the windows by hand. It does not have electric motors in them. And again, it does have your sunglass holders. Ooh, pretty basic car. You got to consider, when these things first came out, these Kia Spectras, the cheap ones were only $10,000, so it's a pretty cheap car. He got it even cheaper. He paid $800. If you get 45,000 miles out of a car you paid $800 for, I'd say you made out quite well, considering he hasn't done anything to the engine or the transmission yet. And yes, you do have to deal with different things, as in the door doesn't open anymore, so we got to roll the window down and then grab it from the outside. Yes, with $800 cars, you expect this type of stuff. And of course, to get under the hood, that's broken, so you gotta use your hand, but at least the cable still works. And sure, it came pre-dented, and of course, the bumper paint has been fading off for quite some time, and the headlights are faded. As we look under the hood, it's a straight 4-cylinder engine, normally aspirated, regular fuel injectors, a nice, solid little engine that still runs pretty good. You can see the struts have been replaced. Hey, it's old. Those things wear out. But as we start it up, you can see it's still running pretty good. Most of the parts are still original. Now, it is on its second clutch because he was in high school when he bought it, and he learned how to drive on it, and he learned how to wear the clutch out. But after he put the first clutch in, he didn't have to touch it since then because he learned how to drive it correctly. They're not hard to learn how to drive. For those of you who only drive automatics, find a friend who's got an old beater like this and say you want to learn. If you already know how to drive a car, learning a standard, it took me 10 minutes. I learned to drive on a Chevy Impala. Then I bought a standard Opel. Didn't take 10 minutes to figure out how to drive. Now, learning how to drive a car from scratch with a standard, that's another story. Get it in gear shaking, you don't know what you're doing, how fast to go, how to turn the wheel, that's another story entirely. But if you already know how to drive, it is not that hard to learn to drive a standard. Now, he did get sideswiped here by a guy in an old cop car and I bought one. But hey, it's an $800 car. He didn't bother fixing it. I mean, it's still here. And I mean, yeah, this side doesn't have hubcaps, but the other side does. Now, you can only see one side of the car at a time, so who really cares? But really, $800 car, he's got all this mileage out of the thing, you can't complain. So, I'll get my big old computer out and we'll check the data. So, we shall go to manually select Kia Spectra, 2-liter double overhead cam, and here we go. Now the engine has 8 failures, so let's see. Evap circuit open, control circuit, oxygen sensor stuck, fuel trim, oxygen sensor bank 1 substitute, engine 2 lean. And actually all these were created because he broke the PCV valve sucking air. As you can see, when we turn the key on to just accessory, the check engine light doesn't come on because somebody disconnected it years ago. Well, guess what, people in South Carolina? They don't do no emissions inspection, so no one cares. Just like here in Clarksville. And here's the live data. We'll start looking at stuff. For an old car, the injector on time is pretty close, 4.8 milliseconds, 4.7 milliseconds. Pretty good for an old car like this. Fuel trim at idle is only 0.5. That's practically nothing. Long-term fuel adaptation is 0.00. That's perfect. 135,000 miles. Fuel trim is perfect, 0.00. You can't argue with that. Airbag light is on. They don't work anymore. And the brake warning light's on, but I mean, the brakes work fine. He has upgraded it to a JVC, but he didn't bother putting a backup camera on it. And here we go. It's an economy car, but hey, Still got some zip to it. Handles quite well. Mind you, it's got new struts on the front, as we saw. Heat's working so well, I gotta turn it down. I'm roasting in here. Transmission shifts very smoothly in all gears. Their automatic transmissions may stink, but this standard is in perfect shape. Brake stopped the car perfectly fine with a little jerk, and it still corners perfectly well. Let's take it to the drag strip. Now, we all know this is not a race car. This was originally a $10,000 Econobox car. So, we come to our little stop, and let's see what this thing can do. On your mark, get set, go! It spins the tires. That's not bad. With that standard transmission, it really is not bad. It's got some get up and go. Hey, I'm impressed by this $800 car. It's doing burnouts here. You can spin around in this thing. And yeah, you can hear things rattle here and there, but come on now, it's an Econobox car. But it does have 4 doors and reasonable amount of room in the back seat. Wipers still work, even though this is full speed. They don't go that fast anymore. And they got a lot of rust on them, but hey, they still wipe. Really, it handles in the twisties quite well for a little bitty Econobox car. Though I do put that down to the standard transmission. Mind you, one of the front turn signals is burnt out. The other side works, but the left side's got a burnout bulb. I gotta say, I'm impressed by this $800 car 3.5 years ago. Heck, it'd still be worth $800 today, maybe even more. Now when you hit the brakes, you'll notice the steering wheel starts shaking a little, but hey, it's an old car, and the front brake rotors are a little bit warped. You gotta expect that with an old car, if you don't mind. It only happens when you're slowing down from high speeds. They're warped, so the steering wheel shakes a little bit when you hit the brakes hard. But if you hit them soft, like we are now, slowing down from 30, they really don't shake at all, so it's nothing to worry about. Now, if you don't mind the way that it looks with various bashes and hubcaps that have fallen off, the thing runs like a clock. And, like the owner, you live in a state like South Carolina that doesn't do emissions testing, you don't care. You'd have to fix a whole bunch of crap to make the thing pass emissions because it's got all those stupid little codes, but it runs perfectly fine. So it harkens back to the olden days when if it ain't broke, don't fix it was the norm. People drove $500 to $800 cars around for years and didn't care. Realize this Kia was made in Korea. It was made 2004, before they had all the engine problems and everything with these things, when they started making them in the United States, and the machinery wasn't right, and the engines would blow up, and then they supposedly fixed them, but I've had customers who had them fixed, and then they blew up a second time, and they just said, we fixed it the first time, it's not our fault now you need to pay for a new engine. No. This was when Kia, hey, with the standard transmission, we're making pretty good little cars. As this one shows, still going like a champ. So if you know how to drive a standard transmission, you can find one of these things used, go for it. If you get 45,000 miles out of an $800 car and it's still going this good, I'd say you can't go wrong. And here's some bonus questions and answers. The Day says, Scotty, I got a question. Should I use Amsol or Toyota WS? I've been researching the drain and fill on my Toyota. Is it better off switching to Amsol, which is pure synthetic oil, or should I use the Toyota OEM WS oil? Stick with OEM. Now here, the engineers at Toyota know what they're doing. They have an oil that was engineered for their vehicle. It's best to stick with it. Now, Amsol makes excellent oil. There's no arguing that. But they make oil that they sell to everybody, to all kinds of cars. A company like Toyota that's had enough oil designed for their particular vehicle, you're better off sticking to it. You don't want to mix them. Who knows what additives are in? See, the thing is, when you're buying oil, all the oil companies don't tell anybody what the secret ingredients are because they say that's their copyright. It's their patent. We don't want anybody to copy us. So, even I don't know what's in these things. They won't tell me. So, if you're chancing something like Amsol, which is generally a very good oil, but you really don't know what's in it. Where the Toyota one was designed by their engineers. I mean, if it was some company that made crappy stuff, I'd say, yeah, put a better oil in. But Toyota makes good stuff, so just stick to the OEM. There's too many differences in things these days. When I was a young mechanic, all the coolants were green antifreeze. They were all the same. It didn't matter. But now there's all kinds, so you're better to stick with what it was designed for in the first place. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.